Welcome back, everyone. Let me start with a simple question. If someone asks you, how many articles does the Indian Constitution have? You might say 395. Or 470. Or somewhere in between. And that confusion, that is exactly where most UPSC aspirants lose marks. Today, we are going to cover Chapter 3 of M.Laxmikant, Salient Features of the Constitution, in a way that every single concept stays with you for the exam. We will cover every feature, every important article number, every key case, and every trick point, including the ones from my notes that most textbooks miss. So grab your notebook, and let's get started. Let us begin with the most fundamental question: why is the Indian Constitution called unique? Yes, it has borrowed provisions from almost every major constitution in the world. But it did not simply copy and paste. Every borrowed provision was modified to suit India's conditions, its diversity, its history, and its challenges. Now, two extremely important points before we go further. First, the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 is known as the mini-constitution. Why? Because it made such a large number of changes across so many parts of the constitution at one time that it was almost like rewriting it. Second, the Keswananda Bharti case of 1973. The Supreme Court ruled in this landmark judgment that while Parliament has the power to amend the Constitution under Article 368, it cannot use that power to alter or destroy the basic structure of the Constitution. This basic structure doctrine is one of the most important concepts for both prelims and mains. Keep it in mind. Now let us talk about the size of the Constitution, and this is where UPSC loves to ask tricky questions. When the Constitution was originally adopted in 1949, it had one preamble, 395 articles, divided into 22 parts, and 8 schedules. Today, as of 2019, it has approximately 470 articles, 25 parts, and 12 schedules. You will see the number 448 written in my notes that refers to the current count of articles if you exclude the ones that have been deleted. But for UPSC purposes, the safe and standard answer is approximately 470 articles. Since 1951, various amendments have deleted about 20 articles and one part, Part 7, and added about 95 articles. 4 new parts have been added: IVA, IXA, IXB, and XIVA. And 4 new schedules have been added: Schedules 9, 10, 11, and 12. These numbers come directly in prelims. Do not skip them. Now the obvious question: why is it so long? Laxmikant gives us 4 reasons. First, geographical factors. India is an extremely large and diverse country. That diversity, linguistic, cultural, religious, regional, needed to be addressed within the Constitution itself. Second, historical factors. The Government of India Act of 1935 was itself a very bulky document. Since the framers drew heavily from it, the size naturally carried over. Third, and this is what makes India truly unique, India has a single constitution for both the center and the states. In a country like the United States, each state has its own separate constitution. In India, one document governs both. So naturally, it has to be longer. Fourth, the Constituent Assembly was dominated by lawyers and legal experts. They were trained to write in detailed, precise, and exhaustive legal language. That tendency added to length. These 4 factors combined gave us the longest written constitution in the world. Now we come to the sources of the Constitution, and this is a topic UPSC loves every single year. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar proudly proclaimed that the Constitution of India has been framed after ransacking all the known constitutions of the world. But remember, it was not a copy-paste job. Each provision was adapted. The single most important source is the Government of India Act, 1935. The structural and administrative framework of our Constitution, the federal scheme, the judiciary, governors, emergency powers, public service commissions all came largely from this act. From the British Constitution, we took the parliamentary system of government. The idea of cabinet responsibility, the rule of law, single citizenship, and the legislative procedure, all British. From the American Constitution, fundamental rights came. Judicial review came. The concept of an independent judiciary also came from America. From the Irish Constitution, the directive principles of state policy came. This is one of UPSC's most favorite source-pairing questions. From Canada, the idea of a federation with a strong centre came. And the residuary powers vesting with the centre, that is also Canadian. From Australia, the concurrent list and the concept of joint sitting of Parliament. From Germany's Weimar Constitution, the provision for suspension of fundamental rights during emergency. From the Soviet Constitution, fundamental duties, and the ideal of justice in the preamble. From Japan, the phrase procedure established by law used in Article 21. From South Africa, the amendment procedure. Now, from my notes, one important point. The political part of the Constitution, meaning the principle of cabinet government and the relations between the executive and the legislature, was largely drawn from the British Constitution. And the Union of States concept comes from the British North American Act of 1867, which is the Canadian Constitution. The Government of India Act of 1935 deserves its own dedicated slide because UPSC has asked questions about this repeatedly. Critics had two major complaints. They said the framers simply included a large number of provisions directly from the 1935 Act. N. Srinivasan called the Constitution both in language and substance a close copy of the Act of 1935. Sir Ivor Jennings, a British constitutionalist, said that many of its provisions are copied almost textually. P.R. Deshmukh made an even sharper comment. He said the Constitution is essentially the Government of India Act, 1935, with only adult franchise added. So how did Dr. Ambedkar respond? In the Constituent Assembly, Ambedkar said, and I want you to note this for your mains answers, as to the accusation that the draft Constitution has reproduced a good part of the provisions of the Government of India Act, 1935, I make no apologies. There is nothing to be ashamed of in borrowing. It involves no plagiarism. Nobody holds any patent rights in the fundamental ideas of a constitution. This is a quotable quote for UPSC mains. Write it. Use it. Constitutions around the world are classified into two types, rigid and flexible. A rigid constitution is one that requires a special procedure for amendment, something more difficult than ordinary legislation. The United States Constitution is a classic example. A flexible constitution, on the other hand, can be amended just like ordinary laws are made. The British Constitution is the best example of this. Now, where does India fall? India's constitution is neither fully rigid nor fully flexible. It is a synthesis of both. My notes describe it well, good balance. Article 368 provides for two types of amendments. The first type requires a special majority of Parliament, meaning a two-thirds majority of members present and voting, plus the support of a majority of the total membership of each house. The second, more rigid type, also requires ratification by at least half the state legislatures. But some provisions, like creating new states changing citizenship rules, can be amended by a simple majority through ordinary legislative process. These do not even come under Article 368. This blend makes India's constitution adaptable without being unstable. Now we come to one of the most important features, the federal system with unitary bias. Let us first look at the federal features. India has a written constitution. There is a division of powers between the center and states through the union list, the state list, and the concurrent list. The constitution is supreme. The judiciary is independent. And there is bicameralism at the center, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Now, the numbers from my notes are very important for the exam. The union list originally had 97 entries, currently it has 98. The state list originally had 66 entries, currently it has 59. The concurrent list originally had 47 entries, currently it has 52. These updated numbers come directly in prelims questions. Some important subject placements to remember. Economic planning is in the concurrent list, entry 20. Education, this is a very popular UPSC question. Education was originally in the state list. The 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 moved it to the concurrent list. Forest concurrent list. Electricity concurrent list. Criminal laws concurrent list. Marriage, divorce and adoption concurrent list. Now here is where it gets really interesting, and this is where UPSC loves to test aspirants. India is not a true or classical federation. It has a strong unitary bias. Look at the unitary features. The center has more powers than the states. There is a single constitution for both. States do not have their own constitutions like in the USA. There is single citizenship. The governor of every state is appointed by the president, meaning by the center. All India services like IS and IPS are controlled by the center. And during an emergency, the entire system becomes unitary, the center takes over. Now look at what scholars have said about India's federal character. K.C. Weir described India as quasi-federal, meaning almost federal, but not fully. Maurice Jones called it bargaining federalism. Granville Austin used the term cooperative federalism. Ivor Jennings described it as federation with a centralizing tendency. And here is one of the most direct UPSC questions. Article 1 of the Constitution describes India as a union of states, not a federation of states. The word federation does not appear anywhere in the Constitution. This implies two things. 1. The Indian Union is not the result of an agreement between states. 2. No state has the right to secede from the Union. India chose the British parliamentary system of government over the American presidential system, and this was a deliberate choice. The framers felt that the parliamentary model was more suited to India's political traditions and diversity. The parliamentary system is also known as the Westminster model, responsible government, and cabinet government. Let us look at its features. First, there are two executives. The president is the nominal executive, the head of state. The prime minister is the real executive, the head of government. My notes clearly mark this distinction. Second, majority party rule. The party with 272 or more seats in Lok Sabha forms the government. Third, collective responsibility. The cabinet is collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha. If one minister makes a mistake, the entire cabinet is accountable. Fourth, dual membership. Ministers must be members of parliament. In the presidential system, like in the USA, this is not required. Fifth, the prime minister leads the government. Sixth, the Lok Sabha can be dissolved by the president on the advice of the prime minister. Now, a very important difference between India and Britain. The British Parliament is sovereign, it can pass any law it wants and no court can strike it down. The Indian Parliament is not sovereign, the Constitution is supreme. The Supreme Court can strike down laws that violate the Constitution through judicial review. Also, India has an elected president, making it a republic. Britain has a hereditary monarch. This is a concept that comes in both prelims and mains, so pay close attention. In Britain, Parliament is sovereign. It can pass any law. No court can question it. In the United States, there is judicial supremacy. The Supreme Court is extremely powerful and can strike down laws based on due process of law, meaning it checks not just the procedure but also the fairness and reasonableness of the law. India chose neither extreme. India adopted a synthesis of both. On one hand, the Supreme Court has the power of judicial review, it can declare any law unconstitutional if it violates the Constitution. On the other hand, Parliament has constituent power, it can amend a major portion of the Constitution through Article 368. Now, one very important and tricky point, Article 21. The American Constitution uses the phrase due process of law. This means courts check whether a law is fair, just and reasonable, not just whether the correct procedure was followed. The Indian Constitution uses the phrase procedure established by law. As my notes clearly state, this means only the procedure is checked, not whether it is fair or just. However, after the Maneka Gandhi case, the Supreme Court expanded the interpretation of Article 21 and brought it closer to the American due process standard. India has one integrated judiciary, a single court system for the entire country. At the top sits the Supreme Court. Below it are the high courts in each state. Below the high courts are district courts and other subordinate courts. This single system enforces both central laws and state laws, unlike the United States, where there is a separate federal judiciary and a separate state judiciary. The Supreme Court plays three critical roles. First, it acts as a federal court, resolving disputes between the center and states. Second, it is the highest court of appeal in the country. Third, it is the guardian of the Constitution and the protector of fundamental rights. The Constitution also ensures the independence of this judiciary through several provisions: security of tenure for judges, fixed service conditions, expenses charged on the Consolidated Fund of India so that they cannot be controlled through budget cuts, and a prohibition on discussing the conduct of judges in the legislature. Part 3 of the Constitution, the Fundamental Rights. These were inspired primarily by the American Constitution, the Bill of Rights. There are 6 fundamental rights. Right to equality, Articles 14 to 18. Right to freedom, Articles 19 to 22. Right against exploitation, Articles 23 and 24. Right to freedom of religion, Articles 25 to 28. Cultural and educational rights, Articles 29 and 30. Right to constitutional remedies, Article 32. 3 things you must never forget about fundamental rights. First, they are justiciable. You can enforce them through courts. If your rights are violated, you can go directly to the Supreme Court under Article 32, which Dr. Ambedkar called the heart and soul of the Constitution. Second, they are not absolute. Reasonable restrictions can be placed on them by the state. Third, and this is a direct prelims question every few years, fundamental rights can be suspended during a national emergency. Article 20 protects against arbitrary conviction. Article 21 protects the right to life and personal liberty. Also remember, the Supreme Court can issue 5 writs to enforce these rights: habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, certiorari, and quo warranto. Directive Principles of State Policy. Part 4. The Directive Principles of State Policy. These were inspired by the Irish Constitution. The DPSP are guidelines for the government, directions to the state on how to govern. They cover economic welfare, social justice, international peace, and administrative matters. Now, the key distinction. DPSP are non-justiciable. You cannot go to court and say, the government has not followed this directive principle, enforce it. Courts cannot do that. But, and this is important, the Constitution itself declares that these principles are fundamental in the governance of the country. The state has a moral obligation to apply them while making laws. They are classified into 3 categories. Socialistic directives, focused on reducing economic and social inequality. Gandhian directives, rooted in Gandhi's ideas, like village panchayats, cottage industries, and cow protection. Liberal intellectual directives, like Uniform Civil Code, separation of judiciary from executive, and free legal aid. The Minerva Mills case of 1980 is absolutely critical here. The Supreme Court held that the Constitution is founded on the bedrock of a balance between fundamental rights and DPSP. Neither can be used to completely destroy the other. Fundamental duties. Fundamental duties were not part of the original Constitution. They were added during the period of internal emergency between 1975 and 1977 by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act on the recommendation of the Swaran Singh Committee. They were placed in Part 4A of the Constitution under Article 51A. Originally, 10 duties were added. Later, the 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002 added one more duty related to education. So the total is now 11 fundamental duties. Like the DPSP, fundamental duties are also non-justiciable, they cannot be enforced by courts. However, they serve as a reminder to citizens that rights and duties go hand in hand. Secular state. India is a secular state, but the word secular was not always in the Constitution. The word secular was added to the preamble by the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976, the same amendment that gave us socialist and integrity. Now India's secularism is different from Western secularism. Western secularism is called negative secularism. The state stays completely away from all matters of religion. Religion is a purely private affair. India practices positive secularism. This means the state treats all religions equally. It does not promote any one religion. But it also does not stay completely away. The state can intervene in religious matters when it is required for social welfare. For example, abolishing untouchability or reforming temple practices. India has no official state religion. Every citizen has the freedom to profess, practice, and propagate any religion. Universal adult franchise. Universal adult franchise is enshrined in Article 326 of the Constitution. Every Indian citizen who is 18 years of age or above has the right to vote regardless of their religion, race, caste, sex, literacy level, or financial status. The voting age was originally 21 years. The 61st Constitutional Amendment Act of 1988 reduced it to 18 years. This was a bold step for a newly independent nation, especially given the low literacy rates at the time. But the framers trusted the people of India. Single citizenship. Despite being a federal country, India provides for only a single citizenship, Indian citizenship. In the United States, a person is both a citizen of the USA and a citizen of their particular state. They owe allegiance to both and enjoy two sets of rights. In India, there is no such division. Whether you are from Kerala or Kashmir, Assam or Andhra Pradesh, you are simply an Indian citizen. You enjoy the same political and civil rights all over the country. This single citizenship promotes fraternity, the sense of brotherhood that the preamble speaks about. Independent bodies. The Constitution establishes several independent bodies that act as pillars of Indian democracy. The Election Commission, Article 324, ensures free and fair elections to Parliament, state legislatures, and the offices of President and Vice President. The Controller and Auditor General of India, Article 148, audits the accounts of both central and state governments. He acts as the guardian of public finances. The Union Public Service Commission Articles 315 to 323 conducts examinations for recruitment to all India services like the IAS, IPS and IFS and advises the President on disciplinary matters. State Public Service Commissions perform similar function. At the state level, their independence is guaranteed through security of tenure, fixed service conditions and most importantly, their expenses are charged to the Consolidated Fund of India, meaning they are not dependent on annual budget approvals. Emergency provision. The emergency provisions are one of India's most unique constitutional features and one of the most frequently tested topics in UPSC. There are three types of emergency. The first is national emergency under Article 352. This can be proclaimed on grounds of war, external aggression, or armed rebellion. During this emergency, the entire country effectively becomes unitary. The second is state emergency, also called President's Rule under Article 356. This is proclaimed when the constitutional machinery in a state fails, when no government can be formed, or when a government refuses to function constitutionally. The third is financial emergency under Article 360. This can be proclaimed when the financial stability or credit of India, or any part thereof, is threatened. Now, the most important point. During an emergency, the federal structure of India temporarily transforms into a unitary one. The centre becomes all-powerful. The states come under total central control. And this transformation happens without formally amending the constitution. It is automatic. This is what makes India's emergency provisions unlike any other constitution in the world. Three-tier government. Originally, India had a two-tier government structure, the centre and the states. The 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts of 1992 added a third tier, local self-government. The 73rd Amendment gave constitutional recognition to Panchayati Raj institutions, the rural local bodies. It added Part 9 and Schedule 11 to the Constitution. The 74th Amendment gave constitutional recognition to municipalities, the urban local bodies. It added Part 9A and Schedule 12 to the Constitution. This three-tier system, centre, state, and local government, is a unique feature. No other constitution in the world provides for a third tier of local government in this manner. Cooperative society. The 97th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2011 added cooperative societies as a constitutional feature. It made three specific changes. First, it made the right to form cooperative societies a fundamental right, added to Article 19. Second, it added a new directive principle of state policy, Article 43-B, on the promotion of cooperative societies. Third, it added an entirely new part to the Constitution, Part 9B, titled the Cooperative Societies, covering Articles 243-ZH to 243-ZT. This ensures that cooperative societies function in a democratic, professional, autonomous, and economically sound manner. Criticism of Constitution. Now let us look at the criticisms of the Constitution, because UPSC Mains frequently asks for a critical analysis. There are 6 major criticisms. First, it is called a borrowed constitution. Critics used phrases like bag of borrowings, patchwork, and hodgepodge constitution to describe it. Second, it is called a carbon copy of the 1935 Act. We have already discussed Ambedkar's rebuttal to this. Third, it has been called un-Indian or anti-Indian. Critics argued that it does not reflect the political traditions and spirit of India. Fourth, it has been called an un-Gandhian constitution. Critics said it does not contain the philosophy and ideals of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the nation. K. Hanumanthriya, a member of the Constituent Assembly, said we wanted the music of Veena or Sitar, but here we have the music of an English band. Fifth, elephantine size. H.V. Kamath commented that even India's national emblem is an elephant, and so is its constitution, the bulkiest the world has produced. Sir Ivor Jennings called it too long and complicated. Sixth, paradise of lawyers. Ivor Jennings called it a lawyer's paradise, meaning the legal language is so complex that it gives lawyers endless work and makes it inaccessible to common citizens. However, all these criticisms have been answered. Ambedkar addressed most of them directly in the Constituent Assembly. The framers made deliberate, reasoned choices, and history has largely vindicated them. Now Chapter 3 complete. Let us do a quick recap of everything we covered today. Chapter 3 has 17 salient features. For UPSC, the most critical ones are: the size of the Constitution, originally 395 articles, now approximately 470. The sources: maximum from the Government of India Act, 1935. Federal with unitary bias, India is a union of states, not a federation. Parliamentary system, the Westminster model. The President is nominal, the PM is real. Article 21, procedure established by law, not due process. Articles 20 and 21 cannot be suspended even during a national emergency. 42nd Amendment, mini constitution, added socialist, secular, integrity, fundamental duties. Emergency articles 352, 356, and 360. 73rd and 74th Amendments added panchayats and municipalities in 1992. These are your high priority revision points. Make sure they are in your notes. That is all for Chapter 3, Salient Features of the Constitution. I hope every concept is clear. Go through the recap table one more time before you close this video. And do drop a comment below. Tell me how many of these points were already in your notes and how many are new additions. I would love to know. If this video was helpful, share it with your friends. See you in the next video, Chapter 4, the Preamble in detail. Before you go, I've put together a quick reference notes slide at the end of this video with the most frequently asked topics from this chapter in UPSC. Make sure you pause and save that slide. It will save you a lot of revision time later.